Sherlock Holmes: A Game of Shadows is a 2011 movie directed by Guy Ritchie. This is the sequel of the 2009 movie Sherlock Holmes. In both movies, Sherlock Holmes and Dr. John Watson are interpreted by Robert Downey Jr. and Jude Law respectively. Although this movie is influenced by The Final Problem, a short story written by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, Sherlock Holmes: A Game of Shadows has its own plot and original story. 1891. Many terrorist attacks are occurring around Europe, and because of them, there are many discrepancies between the most powerful European states. At a later stage, Sherlock Holmes realizes that these attacks are the fruit of Professor Moriarty's evil mind, after receiving a mysterious package from his ex-girlfriend, Irina Adler, interpreted by Rachel McAdams. At a party, Sherlock Holmes meets Zimsa, a French gypsy whose brother had been kidnapped by the detective's nemesis to take advantage of him for his evil plans. During a conversation with Moriarty, Holmes understands that the next victims will be his best friend and colleague, Dr. Watson, and his wife. In the following scene, the detective gets on the same train as his two friends so as to save them. After fighting with Moriarty's men, he succeeds in his mission. So Holmes and Watson, concentrating in defeating Moriarty once and for all, go to France in order to meet Zimsa and to understand what Moriarty's next move is. After a meeting with some French anarchists, friends of the gypsy, the trio realizes that the next terrorist attack will occur in Paris at the Opera Theatre. Unfortunately, they realize too late that they have been put off a scent, as the attack doesn't occur at the Paris Opera, but in a Grand Hotel, where a meeting of weapons businessmen was to take place. In fact, the target of the assassination was the owner of a very important and rich industry producing weapons in Germany. Fancy that, Moriarty becomes the new owner of this building. So the trio goes there, hoping to stop Moriarty for good. At the factory, Moriarty captures, interrogates and tortures Holmes, while Watson battles Moran, one of the professor's henchmen. Eventually, Holmes and Watson escape the building, but Holmes is seriously wounded, and this will influence his final battle with his enemy. The English detective understands that the professor's final target is a peace summit in Switzerland at the Reichenbach Castle. The trio has no problem in crashing the party, as Holmes' brother, Mycroft, is one of the English Prime Minister's councillors. Moriarty's plan is to kill one of the ambassadors with the aim of starting a world war between nations because of the different nationality of the murderer, that is to say, Zimsa's brother. Eventually, Watson succeeds in preventing Zimsa's brother from killing the ambassador. Meanwhile, Holmes goes outside so as to face Moriarty once and for all. By the way, the professor is still happy and satisfied given that, although his plan failed, he is still rich thanks to the profits stemming from the weapons business. However, Holmes reveals that while tortured at the German factory, he managed to steal Moriarty's red book, in which many notes regarding the people who bought the weapons from him are contained, and replaced this notebook with a blank one. So his enemy is no longer rich, and he will probably get arrested once the summit ends. A very angry Moriarty attacks Holmes. The detective gets to the conclusion that the only solution for the two of them is to fall down the Reichenbach waterfalls. Their bodies are not found, and Watson thinks they are dead. In the final scene, we see Watson finishing typing the entire story of the last adventure he experienced with his friend. Once he leaves the room, Holmes, who is perfectly concealed in Watson's office, reads his colleague's memoirs on the typewriter and adds a question mark after the word "the end." In this movie, there are some faithful elements to the short story The Final Problem by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. For example, the dialogue between Professor Moriarty and Holmes is the same as in The Final Problem. In fact, every single word fits with the ones in the short story. The only difference is that in the written work this conversation occurs in Sherlock Holmes' office in Baker Street, whereas in the movie the director decided to move this argument into Moriarty's office. Another faithful element in the comparison between the movie and the book is the presence of Moriarty's work, The Dynamics of an Asteroid. Conan Doyle talks about this fictitious work in his 1915 novel The Valley of Fear. In this movie, not only do we run into Mycroft Holmes, Sherlock's brother, who appears several times in the Sherlock Holmes saga, but also into Colonel Sebastian Moran, Moriarty's loyal cooperator and expert sniper. His favorite weapon is an air rifle described thoroughly by the author. Another element stemming from the final problem is the striking location where Sherlock Holmes and his enemy apparently lie, that is to say the wonderful Reichenbach waterfalls and the castle nearby. The only tiny difference is that in the movie Sherlock Holmes goes to this place with the excuse of taking part in a peace conference. The short story totally lacks this excuse. As far as Holmes' presumed death is concerned, in the short story Watson assumes that his friend is dead, as he didn't see the exact moment in which Holmes and Moriarty fall down from the balcony. In the movie, it is the complete opposite. We can also find another faithful element inspired by Conan Doyle's books, that is to say the small piece of paper Holmes leaves Dr. Watson. The written message, "Dear Watson, come at once if convenient, if inconvenient, come all the same," is inspired by the message always left to Watson by Holmes in 1913 Doyle's tale, The Adventure of the Creeping Man. Last but not least, is the last scene of the movie we can see Watson typing about his friend's death. The words we can see while he's typing are the same as those written in the novel.